Hi, and today we're going to talk about rounding numbers using significant figures or decimal places when rounding the answer to an equation. So first of all, in rounding numbers, there are two different ways to determine at which digit to round the answer, to round the number. One is you can use sig figs or significant figures. And two, you use the number of decimal places or the number of digits past the decimal place. And you use one of these options depending on what type of equation it is. If it's a multiplication or division equation, then we're going to use significant figures or sig figs. If it's addition and subtraction, then we're going to use decimal places. Now, in significant figures, first we're going to talk about significant figures in multiplication and division. And if you remember from the first video, significant figures, when you determine significant figures, you're going to look for the non-significant digits. Then we're just going to count everything else is significant, because it's easier to determine the non-significant digits because the zeros kind of jump right out at you. Now there's two types of non-significant digits. There are all leading zeros. Anytime you have zeros in the front of the number, like for this example, 0.006743, these zeros right here at the beginning of the number, these are leading zeros. And so since these three are leading zeros, then we can count the rest of these as significant. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 significant figures. Now the second type of non-significant digits are the trailing zeros in any number with no decimal point. Now remember, the number has to have no decimal point in order for the trailing zeros to count as non-significant. So for example, this number, 6.743000, it does have trailing zeros right here, these last three zeros, but the number does have a decimal point, so we're only going to count those as significant. We're not going to say that those are insignificant. So this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 significant figures. The second example, 6,743,000, it has these zeros at the end, these trailing zeros, and look, there's no decimal point written in this number. So there's only going to be the 1, 2, 3, 4 significant figures left. 4 significant figures. So anyway, that's a real short review on significant figures. Now, when you do significant figures, you only use significant figures to round when you're rounding an answer to a multiplication problem. So you count the significant figures of each of the numbers in the multiplication problem, use the least amount of the sig figs, and then you round the answer to that least amount of sig figs. So for instance, here's a multiplication problem. 0.0280 times 230 equals 6.44. Now here's this first number, 0.0280, has three significant figures in it. See, 1, 2, 3. 3 significant figures. Now this other number that's going into the multiplication problem is 230, and that has 1, 2 significant figures to it. So see, out of these 3 significant figures, or 2 significant figures of this numeral, we're going to choose the least. This is, in this case, it would be the 2 sig figs from the 230. So then we're going to take the answer, 6.44, and we're going to round that to 2 significant figures. 2 significant figures, which would be the 6.4. Now, how you round it is you get the 6.4, those 2 digits, and then you draw a line. And then if this next number is 4 or under, then you just leave this as it is, 6.4. Now, if that number, that 4 at the end, would be a shorter or a greater number, greater than 5 or greater, then we would round this to 6.5. But since this last number is just a 4, we're going to keep this 4 over here and just keep the answer at 6.4. Now the second way to round the answer in an equation is by decimal places. And we use decimal places instead of sig figs to round when we're dealing with addition and subtraction problems. Now it's very similar to rounding with sig figs. You look for but we're just looking for the number of digits after the decimal. Number of digits after the decimal. And we're going to look for that number, and then we're going to choose the least amount of digits after the decimal depending on what input numbers we have down here. So see, we have on this one, we have 1, 2, 3 digits after the decimal, 7, 4, and 3. So that's 3 digits after the decimal. And then on this one, 29.45, we have 1, 2 digits after the decimal. See, 2 digits after the decimal. So we're going to choose the least amount of digits after the decimal, which in this case would be 2. And that's what we're going to round to at the end at the resultant number. 2 digits after the decimal right here. 1, 2. And we're going to draw that line after the 1, 2. And since this 3 is a 4 or below, it's less than half the halfway marker. We're just going to leave this at 1, 9. So the answer should be rounded to 36.19 right there. So the answer should be, when it's rounded, is 36. Oops, sorry, I'm writing with the mouse. 36.19. There you go.